Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Paddocks. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Qatar Grand Prix weekend, from Friday's FP1 and Quali to Saturday's exciting sprint day and Sunday's Grand Prix. On the episode, we have Rachel, Melissa, and myself, Chelsea, and we're going to kick things off with Friday's sessions.
All right. So Friday, as you guys know, with the new sprint format for the weekend, it's a sprint weekend. Fridays, we only have one free practice session, followed by qualifying for Sunday. So let's get started with the free practice session. Did you guys see Haas taping a cup to like the top of their scene of like the little like pit area that they have like along the track to measure their wind direction?
I did. I saw that. And, as my dad would say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It works.
And honestly, sometimes you have to go with that old school method because that's what does work best, as your dad would say too. So, but it's funny because Crofty came up with a really funny name for it, and it was along the lines of Gunther's cost capometer, something like that. And I really wish I had like wrote it down at least on my hand to accurately name it as he named it, because it was just funny how he kept on like mentioning it. And he's like, yeah, they're getting the wind direction, and like they would just like show it real quick and then go away. But from the only practice session we saw of the weekend, we saw Max finish out in P1, followed by Carlos and Charles in P2 and P3.
And then in qualifying, I was kind of upset with qualifying, I'm not going to lie, because Oscar, his qualifying for P3, it got pushed down to P6 because of a time deletion in Q3. And I get why it was deleted. I understand. I don't like how they went about telling him when it got deleted, because Lando Norris also got pushed down to P10 for the same thing. And that one was sucky because basically he ended up having no lap time for Q3. And Lando said for him it was because of oversteering. Oscar thinks he just pushed too far. I mean, technically the boys still did super well because they were in the top 10, but it absolutely sucked because Oscar found out during his victory interview for getting P3. And that's just so awkward.
I felt so bad for him when that happened. Like, he took it like a champ and he brushed it off, as he always does. He made a lot of jokes about it on social media afterwards, but I felt so bad for him. And I felt bad for Lando too, because, like, you could kind of tell that he knew when he got out of his car that his lap time was going to be deleted and he was going to be dropped down. Like, he kind of didn't even really bother to go into the interview area. He's like, it's gone. I know it's gone. I'm not even going to bother. That was just kind of crushing. I felt so bad for both of them. They both did really well.
No, they really did. And I don't think they told anyone in general, because at the end of George's interview, you literally like see him go like with a very confused face, like, where's Lando? And like he's literally like turning around looking for him. And I remember like at first, like my boyfriend and I were like, oh, he's like throwing some shade. And then I was like, no, I don't think he is, because look at his like facial reaction. Like he's genuinely confused. Like he's looking around, and once he finds out that his time got deleted and everything, he's just like, oh, like you literally like it's news to him. So it sucks it happened that way. It did bring some comedy to it, like George's reaction. But at the end, I don't know. I feel like they could like handle it a lot smoother. But out of qualifying, we would see Max starting, of course, at pole in P1 on Sunday, followed by George and Lewis in P2 and P3, thanks to Lando and Oscar being penalized with their time deletions. But enough about qualifying on Friday. Let's go on to Saturday with the sprint shootout and the sprint. So overnight, between Friday into Saturday, they made changes to the track around turn 13, if I am correct, to help with the track limitations from the two sessions on Friday. So because of this, the FIA decided to have a 20-minute familiarization session so that the drivers get familiar with the new layout. And it was kind of like silly just to see them just like drive around for like a short amount of time and then having to like get information for the sprint shootout. It was, I mean, it was a cool little extra session, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, Max almost got P1, but because of a time deletion, he lost the position. So he did get the time deletion for that track thing, so those changes were obviously not going great. And I don't even think the racers were notified about it before it happened. Like they just came to the track and it was done, and they're like, okay, this is how you're going to race. So as a driver, I would probably not enjoy that either. But I do feel like this weekend is like it just started becoming a McLaren weekend with Lando and Oscar because they kept just doing well and they ended up getting top 1 and 2 for the sprint start. So I like it.
I agree. I'm living for this McLaren renaissance. It's just absolutely incredible to watch.
So from sprint shootout to now the sprint, and the sprint was chaotic to say the least.
Yep, we had both Lawson and Sargent DNF'd separately. They didn't crash. Within the first few laps of the race, they both just kind of spun off separately. There was no bad damage to either car, so that was good. No one had to do any major adjustments overnight, which I'm sure the teams were relieved about.
Yeah, literally, thank goodness there was like little to no damage to Sargent's car because I'm constantly feeling sorry for the mechanics and everyone in that garage needing to work on the repairs after like a quali or a practice session. Like it's just, I can just imagine the pressure they have to go through to make those changes in such little time. But there was also an incident between Checo, Ocon, and Nico. The three of them were pretty much sandwiched into turn two. And to me, it at least looked like Nico had like backed up or backed off at the last second. And then you just see like Ocon colliding into Checo, causing both of them to DNF. And it was really, really rough to watch that replay over and over again.
Yeah, that crash was definitely really intense. They briefly showed Checo's car in the post-race show, and it was bad. Like, you could take one look at it and tell that the mechanics are going to be doing a lot of work to get it ready for the race.
I've been feeling bad for Checo as well recently. All the not so nice rumors going around and him DNFing sprint weekend and knowing the results that his teammate got, like it just must really hurt. And I hope he's doing okay mentally. We've all seen he's come out with his mental health issues. So it's just like, to me, I'm always just like, I hope he's okay and he has people to, provide that support when needed. Cause I can just imagine what he's going through this weekend yet again.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Nico also ended up retiring from the sprint due to some damage caused by the crash, which sucks for him. Haas has been doing pretty decently this year, considering their past seasons. So I feel kind of bad. I feel bad for Nico. Yeah, Checo's really been drawing the short straw lately. I do feel bad for him. I also hope he can give some notes to the other drivers to also go to therapy because I think most of them need it.
But on a brighter note, Oscar won the sprint. And all I can say is what a rookie year he's having. I was watching that race and I was just like, come on, let's go, Oscar. Let's go. Let's go. Like as like lap kept on getting complete, I was just like, okay, only a few more left. It was great.
Yeah, I'm so happy for Oscar. He's just been doing so well, and I love how chill he is about it. Like he's very like, oh, okay, cool. Like relax. Like, okay, yeah. And also his mom's tweet of just a photo of two mini champagne bottles after he won the sprint was iconic. She is a Twitter queen, and I am so here for it.
Yeah, I love that in the post interviews, Oscar was like saying the safety car were his friends today. But honestly, I got a little worried because when George was in front of him during one of the safety cars, like he was going purposely slow to screw with Oscar's tires. And I was like, oh, that's so rude, but like I get it. But then seeing how quick those soft tires just ended up not working for so many of the drivers, I was like, okay, obviously that strategy was probably not the best decision with the track that they had going. But also, we can't talk about the sprint without talking about Max because he did it, everyone. Max is now the champion for his third consecutive year, and I am not surprised at all because at this point I completely understand the championship being his. I also don't even see him stopping. Like he already won it. He's like, okay, cool. Well, see you in the next race. I'll get first again. Because he likes his podcast.
Yeah, I definitely don't see him stopping or this Red Bull domination ending anytime soon. He's just completely in a league of his own at this point, and you gotta respect it. At the end of the day, you do, and he's just killing the game. But now to the main part of our little recap episode, the race. But before we get started with the main event of the weekend, let's talk about some changes that were made before the actual race. The FIA had decided to make today's race a three-stopper. So this means that the FIA, had set a limit of 18 laps for new tires in the race. Now, let's say a driver goes over that limit, he would be black flagged and disqualified. So straight chaos from the start.
And that applies to used tires as well. The amount of laps that the tires have already been run will be deducted from the 18 laps. So if the tires had been run on 3 laps, they can only be run on 15 during the race. I wouldn't want to be the one responsible for keeping track of the laps per tire. That sounds like a lot of concentration and maybe a little bit of math, and it sounds like a lot of pressure. I also saw that apparently the FIA released a chart essentially of all of the tires, like every team's tires and how many laps each one had left, which the other teams could kind of use to figure out what each one was doing as far as strategy-wise, what they could be doing. I feel like that's kind of sketchy of the FIA, but it's the FIA.
The FIA is just going to do what's going to do and be the FIA at the end of the day. But also, it hurt as a Ferrari fan to see this, and a lot of the other girls on the pod too. Carlos did not start in the race at all. It turns out that he had a fuel leak in his car, and the mechanics ultimately did not have enough time to fix the car before the race. Really, really sad day for us Ferrari fans.
Yeah, that wasn't the best thing to see. That was just so sad. But I mean, I don't know. What can you do? I know the car was having issues all week. Well, weekend.
Yeah, I was definitely disappointed to see that. Like, that was, I think, the first thing I saw when I woke up, and I was like so confused briefly. And then I was just really disappointed as a Ferrari girl. But my husband said during the race that the reason Ferrari didn't mess up Leclerc's strategy was because Carlos was acting as the strategist this weekend. Which he has a point. But in other news, the Nico Rosberg curse lives to see another day. This time with Checo being the victim from starting in the pits due to the engineers working on his chassis too much. So they basically ended up with having essentially 3 drivable cars at the same time. The same thing that kind of happened to Williams with Logan's car a couple weeks ago. And then he ended up with I think 6 track limit violations. And he ended up with 3 or 4 5-second penalties, and just my guy couldn't catch a break this weekend. He really couldn't.
He really couldn't. It was just one after the other, every few seconds. But on the note of Nico Rosberg's curse, this year has been the year where, in general, Max breaks all the curses. And my delusional self is just thinking how this can help some of my favorite drivers next year. Since he's breaking these curses, maybe it'll help someone else next year. Who knows? Let's see what happens, because I was hoping for something after I saw that selfie. I don't know about y'all, but that's just me. So here I got the championship, so it's okay.
I agree. I also heard that it might have been Checo's car, not Max's car, but either way, Max has been breaking every curse. Even if it was his car, we know he'd break the curse. We know. And there were so many track limit violations during this race that I lost track. It wasn't as bad as Austria, where it was just constant track limit violations, but there were a lot. And it was probably, a lot of it was due to the adjustment they made at the turn where they're yeah, we're going to fix it. And then they just made it narrower, just making the problem worse. So again, the FIA being the FIA.
I think they really need to just like reevaluate the circuit a bit for next year. I know it's technically still new, so I guess it may be expected, or maybe the track was just rushed, or maybe it was all the sand that was making everything messy, but I don't know. This track didn't seem very great for our drivers and coloring in the lines.
Yeah. I will say the mandatory 3 pit stops did make the race pretty interesting, in my opinion. It was kind of great to see the different strategies of like when to pit that each team had and their tire management. I guess they didn't really need to manage tires, but if they're using the used ones, I don't know. I thought it was pretty interesting to kind of see.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rach. I really liked this, I guess, style of racing. It just to me it made me feel like the teams had to really think on what strategy to use. And like I guess on like the spectator side, it was exciting to see like when they would stop and like how it would affect them like grid spot wise throughout the race. Cause like we at one point saw Alex Albon leading the race, which was crazy. But then in the back of my mind, I was like, hell yeah. And then I was like, but he hasn't like pitted yet. So let's enjoy it while we can. So that was like cool to watch, like the differences in how like it constantly was changing. I enjoyed it. I have no complaints on my end.
Yeah, and I mean, this race was interesting to watch from the get-go because we have to talk about it. The Mercedes had a bit of an incident with Lewis and George. They collided right at the start of the race and brought out a safety car, which the accident, it led Lewis, I think it led both of them into the gravel actually, but Lewis had to get off of the track. He was out of the race, but George was able to go back after a pit stop and he was able to finish it. Lewis did end up taking the blame. He did a post interview and he said, "Massive apologies to everyone back at the factory. I think it was probably just a racing incident. I take full responsibility for it. I don't think George had anywhere to go." And if you watch the video, George does look a little bit sandwiched. So, yeah, it was a little tough beginning for them.
It definitely was. And when you watch the replay, like I literally see like Lewis's one of his like rear wheels just like fly off and you just see like him just go into like getting beached without a wheel. And I was just like, "Ugh, that rim." I always think about like how it affects it and everything as someone who sometimes hits curbs. I know how that feels when I hear that sound. So I can just imagine how that sounds in an F1 car. But and even George, like when he pitted, he had to get like a new front wing like switched out and all. So I just want to mention that I love the accountability from Lewis in this situation. I know it's tough to be like accountable of yourself when racing incidents happen, especially like in the heat of the moment. But I feel like it just sets an example for the other drivers that when stuff like this happens, it just happens and you just kind of have to pick up and keep on going at the end of the day.
Yeah, George was saying there's a lot of mutual respect there. And even after the race, he posted like a photo and a video of him and Lewis hugging it out and just been like, it's cool. There was also the FIA released one of their little statement things that Lewis got a reprimand and I think fined for crossing a live track after he basically got beached after the crash. I don't think they showed it on TV, but they posted a thing and it was like he got reprimanded and I think it was a 50,000 euro fine. I don't know. It was kind of confusing to read, but yeah, that was really interesting for me to just kind of like find out afterwards. I was like, I didn't even know that he had done that. It was really weird. But in other team news, McLaren was on it today. I mean, just incredible work by Lando and Oscar and their team. I mean, they had a 1.8 second pit stop for Lando and a 2.1 for Oscar. Incredible. I think up until Lando stopped, the fastest one of the season was like a 1.98 or something like that. Like 1.8, that was shocking.
Isn't that almost beating Red Bull's record? Theirs is 1.8 something for the fastest pit
Yeah.
stop. That's
Yeah, I think
wild.
it's yeah, I don't know what kind of training McLaren is doing, but it's working.
I know I've heard in other podcasts, it's another one I used to listen to. I've seen like clips of like videos on like social media, but it's one of the mechanics from Red Bull, the one that used the guy with the dreads that they usually like show during the race. He talks about how like at each Grand Prix you see like who has the record for the fastest lap that year, and they take it to heart when they're not the fastest one. Like there was at one point like McLaren was like faster than them, or it was like McLaren or Ferrari. Pretty sure it was McLaren. And so it's like whenever I see that, it's like fun to watch because like you can see like when a McLaren had the fastest pit stop like a few weekends ago, and then you see like Red Bull gets back on top of it for the following weekends. So like knowing that in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, let's see how fast Red Bull could go today. So I thought it was interesting, like, they probably like, let's be the fastest, and I mean, they are.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see a 1.7 stop from Red Bull next race. I loved George's approach to the conditions. Like he was opening his visor completely during his pit stops. And at one point you could see him like take his hands off of his steering wheel and put them on top just to try to get airflow into the car because it was so hot. But the way it like looked on the camera was just like a very casual, like, I'm just going to chill here and just kind of wait this out going down the straight to turn 1 doing 195 miles an hour. Just so effortless.
So when he was doing that like airflow thing into his gloves, I was really confused because I was just like, is his like wrist okay? Like, is he like just in general? I was like, is he okay? Did something happen? Like, did he like steer too much that like he messed up something? But when it clicked, I was like, that's actually really smart. And like you said, Rach, the whole visor thing, like I didn't consider the heat for this weekend. So him doing that was really smart. And it just makes me wonder if like for the future, they'll prep for Qatar like they do for Singapore with the saunas and whatnot. So they get used to like the high temperatures.
I agree. I think it'll be really interesting to see how they prep for this race in the future. Especially like they do a lot for Singapore. But we can't talk about the race without talking about the latest episode of the Max Verstappen podcast. I don't care if he doesn't like podcasts. I'm still going to call it that. It's the Max Verstappen podcast. I personally was not super surprised by the result. Max basically is driving a rocket ship. We all know this. And I mean, McLaren have done like a total 180 since the summer break. So the fact that it was another Max in first and McLaren double podium really didn't surprise me. I didn't make solid predictions, but I did have a feeling that it would be at least one of the McLaren boys up on the podium with Max, most likely Lando, especially after the sprint. That was kind of a given once I saw that. Even though they were starting down in P10 and P6, we all know those boys know what they're doing. They're going to get up there. And they did.
Indeed, they did. I didn't have any predictions, but it was a fun race to watch. For me, I think at one point I was looking at the times and Max had like a 25-second lead, and it's just wild how much of a lead he gets in these races and how fast this damn Red Bull car is. Like it's I don't want to say interesting. It's just like it's something to definitely to watch because it's just like how much faster can they get, and they just get that much faster. But as mentioned, McLaren's improvement has just been phenomenal, and watching both Lando and Oscar succeed like this recently has also been enjoyable. We've been getting like a mix up of like podiums and whatnot, and I personally like hearing Oscar on the radio after he gets on the podium because like again he's so like relaxed. He's just like it's like stellar. Like, okay, cool. Like, no big deal. But I am here for Lewis. He is one of my favorites. So, and it just sucks to see how he had to end the race today. But like you said, over the weekend, it isn't over until it's really over. So we know how Lewis is. He just takes it, learns, and improves for the next weekend. And I'm glad that Ferrari weren't their typical selves. Like Rach said, how James had mentioned, maybe Carlos was back there telling Xavi some strategy tips and everything, being like, tell him to do this, let's do this. Hey, who knows? Maybe it'll help. They need to list someone else, and they had to take advantage of Carlos being there.
I honestly also think James is right. I think Carlos was like, just move over and just took the mic. But I did miss out on predictions last week. Although I definitely could have seen at least one of the McLarens getting podium easily. At this point, they're kind of like a safe bet on getting podium because, like you guys were saying, they're kind of kicking ass. Complete 180 from the tractor that they had. But seeing both of them was obviously way better, and while I would have been really happy to see Carlos up there because I love him, things just don't pan out. Still sucks to see Ferrari having these tech issues this weekend because I know that Charles also had some issues on Friday. And of course, it was no surprise to see Max crowned champ. I mean, he even beat Vettel's record this weekend, so he now has the most laps led in a single season, reaching 739. And please keep in mind, we still have 5 races left. Also, I was kind of impressed with George because he got hit and he still bounced back and was able to get 4th. So, shout out to George. You did great this weekend.
And on kind of a more serious note, this race was so intense for the drivers. Logan retired from the race because he wasn't feeling well. Now, granted, he was reported as having flu-like symptoms before the race earlier this week. But, I mean, you could just see when he pulled into the garage when they showed his, face. His face was bright red, and he was just, completely drenched in sweat. And then he had trouble getting out of the car. I mean, he had to be helped out of the car, and I feel like he probably passed out a little bit when he was trying to get out. And Oscar and Max both were kind of sitting while waiting to do their post-race interviews, and then both of them were just on the floor of the cool-down room. Just Oscar walked in, grabbed a water, and just laid on the floor. Just completely was like, I'm out, I'm done. And Max walked in and he was like, does anybody have a wheelchair? And then said, okay, I'm done. I'll see you guys tomorrow. He was just over it. And then Esti got sick during the race. He said around, I think, lap 15 or 16. Alex and Lance both also had to be helped out of their cars. Lance went straight to the ambulance. And in a post-race interview, I think with Sky Sports, Lance said his vision was blurring and he was passing out during the high-speed corners in the last 20 to 25 laps due to the G-forces. Those are symptoms of straight up heat stroke. That is so bad, especially since he was experiencing it while he was racing. And Bottas even called the race torture and that it was on the borderline of acceptable racing conditions. Fernando, in his post-race interview with Sky Sports, said that the FIA, should have a maximum temperature humidity level that they can race under. And he has a good point. Granted, I don't know how that would entirely play out in the other heat-intense locations or humidity-intense locations, like Singapore, but I think it's definitely something the FIA should consider or at least look into.
Speaking of Fernando, he even at one point in the race, he went on the radio asking for someone in the pits to at least throw water into his car because he felt like his seat was burning. And I think he even mentioned after in the post-race interviews, he actually had a burn somewhere. And they wear layers of clothing, their race suit and their fireproofs and whatnot. So it's I can only imagine how hot that is. I don't have leather seats for a reason because it gets hot in Maryland and humid. I don't want to burn myself. So I can just only imagine how it is in an F1 car with the engine and whatnot. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I can attest to that. My car has leather seats, and when you have leather seats in Texas in the summer, you will burn yourself getting in the car if you're wearing shorts or a dress or something. You have to put something down. It is insane. And that's just normal Texas heat. I can't imagine what those cars must feel like with the engine and just everything. Lando said that several of the drivers fainted in the medical center after the race. And honestly, I would wager that all of the drivers were suffering from severe dehydration or heat exhaustion or both. I've experienced heat exhaustion before. It's no joke. I've seen it before. It's so intense and you have to treat it almost immediately. And the fact that they were still driving is I can't even fathom it. And I think at the end of the day, this race was just held too early in the year. It's still so hot in Qatar, and the conditions were just too intense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think if they want to revisit the track in the future, and I think Qatar is on the schedule for 2024, right? Yeah, so they're visiting Qatar again next year, but if you ask me, I think they should hold it like towards the end of the season or maybe like right at the start when it's like a little bit cooler because that's the reason why the World Cup last year was held so late in the year and at night because of that heat. And this race is a night race already, but that shows how much that worked.
I just looked up the calendar for 2024, and it does look like Qatar is at the end of November / like the beginning of December. So yeah, I hope that the conditions are better and that the FIA kind of learned from their mistakes from this year.
But I think one of the things that we're most excited about now that this race weekend is over is the next one. And that's Coda, because many of us girlies, although sadly a few of us won't be there, many of us will be there. And there's someone coming back who I am just so excited to see back in the car. And that's the little honey badger himself, Daniel Ricciardo. And I'm just, no one can see this because we're not recording this live, but I'm so excited.
I am so excited too. I love Danny Rick. Austin is like one of his favorite places to be. He said it himself. And I definitely think he was like, I have to be back by Austin. I have to be back by Austin. And I'm so happy for him that he will be. I am one of the girlies who gets to go. I'm so excited. I also hope that he does some kind of like enchanté pop-up with the Rick Rodeo merch that's coming out. I will be in line at 4 a.m. for that. I will.
So Danny Rick has to do what Lewis did with Brazil and get an honorary citizenship to the United States. That man is more American than a lot of people in this country. And I'm just looking forward to seeing him just channel his inner cowboy and arrive with Horsey McHorse, whatever the horse's name was, with his little paddock pass. I'm hating because a horse, a whole ass horse, has a paddock pass, and I don't. Like, but yeah, Danny, honorary citizen. Let's make it happen.
I agree. I think that would be incredible. Just give him an honorary Texas citizenship. Texas is basically its own country. Truly, it's its own place. It's unique. I do love that the horse had its own paddock pass. It's kind of like Formulino, may he rest in peace, who had his own paddock pass, VIP, could go anywhere. I would love to see that happen again. I mean, this is Daniel's first appearance in the paddock since he broke his wrist. You gotta make a grand entrance. You have to.
I know we're going to talk about this more in the prediction episode, but I just want to see how he comes in. Is he going to be coming in with a guitar? Is he going to be coming in on a horse? Is he going to have a whole carriage with like Max and Yuki and Checo in with him, you know? Come in the group. Bring all the homies. I want to see something fun.
Let's go all of the above. Daniel on a horse pulling a carriage with Max and Checo and Yuki in there while playing a guitar on the horse. All of the above. Go big or go home. It's Texas.
For some weird reason, I can see them like running out like a Mustang or some type of like muscle car, like an old like vintage one. Danny in the driver's seat, and then the rest of the guys figure it out in the passenger seat. But for whatever reason, I see them all coming in with like their little cowboy hats, their cowboy boots, and Danny with his little like handlebar mustache again. Dear God, I hope that does not come back, but I know it will. He's just gonna be like there with his little straw, and like the rest of the guys are gonna be like, oh my God. And Danny is just having the time of his life, torturing his teammates with this grand old entrance. I that's what I see. Them just rolling in on an old muscle car.
Except for Max, because you know that Max would be down for whatever Daniel suggests. Daniel would be like, hey, do this with me. And Max would be like, okay, sure. No questions, just rolls with it.
Actually, now talking about Coda, I'm really excited to see those little like event videos that they do where they make these people do challenges and things. Because I want to see Red Bull take them to a real rodeo. They should take the boys to a rodeo. They're going to be here early anyways to get accustomed to the time zone. Might as well.
I can think of one that is kind of close to San Antonio. Would probably be one of the closer ones to Austin that my friends and I used to go to. I think they're open now. They usually close during the summer because it gets too hot, but I would love to see that. I've been to several rodeos. It would definitely be interesting to see how they handle some things. And yeah, that I think to see Max on a horse would just I feel like that would be hilarious. I feel like he wouldn't know what to do.
I think I'm just really excited to see like all of the teams in America again too, because I feel like Yuki's gonna love the food. People love Texas food. He's gonna have a great time, and you're gonna hopefully see the Ferrari boys go golfing because they're gonna always find not Ferrari boys, Carlos and Lando. They're gonna find somewhere to go golfing, and I don't know. It's exciting. Probably go golfing with Lily and Alex too if she's in town. That would be amazing. I want to see who also attends the Qatar Grand Prix because I feel like this is one of those Grand Prix where you see a lot of famous people attend, a lot of like the WAGs attend and things like that. So, or in the families, like I don't think Oscar's mom is going to come to this one, but maybe some other family members like Lando's parents again. So, and especially since they're on the streak, actually maybe Oscar's mom will come because he just got podium.
If Oscar's mom is there, I'm probably going to make it my mission to find her and tell her how cool she is because I want to be best friends with her. I love her. She is an icon. She is absolutely hilarious. And honestly, I would probably be more excited to meet her than to actually meet Oscar. I mean, she's an icon.
If she is coming, I would look up local Pilates classes that are early in the morning because per her tweets, it looks like she takes 7 a.m. Pilates classes and she gets upset when she can't go because Oscar will be like starting really high up and she'll be like, I got a 7 a.m. Pilates class tomorrow. So if she's coming, she most likely will be attending one of those Pilates classes. So it's time for our favorite part of the podcast, and it's our pre-outro. And this week we're going with a team principal quote. And this one comes from Christian Horner celebrating Max's championship win during the post-race interviews. And it goes like this. It's been by far the most dominant season Red Bull have had. So it comes as no surprise, but to see Max join some of the great names that I talked about earlier. Brabham, Senna, Lauda, Sir Jackie Stewart. He's in the bracket now. And he truly is. And it's going to be fun and sometimes not so fun to see how far he goes. And I wouldn't be surprised if he reaches that GOAT status in the near future.
And honestly, this weekend was a really good race to watch, especially if you're a McLaren and Red Bull fan, because while we were sad to see Checo get hit, the others were doing well. What did you guys think about this weekend's race? Let us know on our socials. Everywhere we are Paddock Girls Podcast, except on Twitter. There you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. As always, don't forget to rate, review, and share the podcast wherever you listen from, like Apple, Spotify, TikTok, wherever you like. Thank you for joining us in the paddock today. We'll see you at the next episode. Bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig.